Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Nocturnity. We have some terrifying Why I Never Go Camping horror stories for you tonight, brought to you, as always, by cardanapparel.com. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the channel before the fear grips you completely. But for now, let's waste no more time and delve directly into the realm of eternal night with these harrowing tales. In the late 80s, back when my children were 8 and 11, both boys, the four of us, my wife included, went on a camping trip in Washington State. On a winding mountain road, I made the worst mistake I've made in my life by deciding to pick up a hitchhiker. Yes, I know, it seems crazy, especially these days, but try to realize I grew up in a time when hitchhiking was a commonplace thing. In the 70s, that's how we got around. I've hitchhiked countless times and have picked up many in my years. Here we were on a hot summer day. This guy's standing on the side of the road with his thumb out, the sun beaming down on him, so we decided, hell, if that was me, I'd appreciate a lift. So we pulled over and let him in the back row of our van. He looked like he needed the ride. Other than a muscle shirt and jean shorts, this guy was red from the sun and dripping in sweat. He had curly hair swimming out of the bottom of a bandana and a curly beard and mustache to match. No sooner than we started moving, things turned horrendously sour. Out of my rear view, I watched him pull out a huge knife from the green gunny sack that he carried with him. I shouted back, "Hey, what are you doing?" Turning back, my wife started shrieking and reaching for our boys. I began to slow to a stop at the same time, and without hesitating, the man slashed the blade down my 11-year-old's arm. My wife shrieked even louder, but was cut off with the man's demand. "Shut up and keep driving," he shouted, putting the knife up to slash again. I said, okay, and hit the gas, and luckily he didn't cut any more. I could see the look in his eye in the rear view. This guy was unhinged. He told me to keep going up the mountain and that he would tell us where to pull over. My son was bleeding profusely, and the look on both of my boys' faces, well, I'll never forget them, as much as I try. I knew in my gut this wasn't going to end well. I didn't know what his plan was exactly, probably to steal our van, but I was sure of one thing. He was going to kill us, or at least try. My mind was racing, and I quickly came to a decision. I was going to crash the van and hope at least some of us were okay. And that's exactly what I did. We hit a slope and I gunned it at full speed into an abutment. The van was totaled. The four of us were wearing seatbelts. He wasn't. While we were hurt, he was severely injured from smashing into the back of the middle row of seats that my sons were sitting in. After a second of being dazed, I unbuckled, hopped out, opened the back door and began pummeling the man's head as he laid there unresponsive. Then I dragged him out and left him on the ground while I flagged a passing car. They took my wife and sons to town for a hospital visit and to get the police. I stayed with the hitchhiker as there wasn't room for me in their car. He came back to consciousness before the police got there, but was in no shape to stand up and try to attack me or even try to run away. He was in really, really bad shape. In the end, we were all okay and he was thrown into jail. But that was the scariest thing I've ever experienced. I don't think I need to tell you, but I will. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Me and my little brother used to go camping a lot when we were kids. We'd literally fill our backpacks with sleeping bags, some wieners to roast, and then hop on our bikes and ride through the woods of western Montana to find a desolate place to stay for the night, almost every weekend of the summer. We did this for a few years. One year, when I was a kid in grade 10, some kids at school told me about a waterfall about an hour's ride from our neighborhood. So I told my brother that would be our first destination at the end of the school year, which was just a few days away from then. My brother's 5 years younger than me, so I'd always get stuck strapping the tent to the back of my bike, but it still always seemed like I had to ride as slow as a slug for him to keep up. But I didn't mind. The directions from the guys at school proved to be right on the money. After a long ride through thick woods, and in longer time than it should have taken, we were there. I couldn't believe I'd lived so close to this site and never seen it before. It was like something out of a storybook. A great big, beautiful waterfall coming over a sharp cliff and falling hundreds of feet to the stream below. We were situated at the top, so it was intimidating to look down, but worth the butterflies in the stomach. I'd never seen such a sight. It was truly majestic. We set up camp a little upstream from the falls and got to making a fire as soon as the tent was pitched. We were starving from the ride, but after a few hot dogs each, we were feeling content. When the sun officially went down, we told each other variations of the same ghost stories we'd heard a million times over, and then turned in for bed. The sound of the waterfall in the distance was so calming we were both asleep within minutes of hitting our pillows. But we didn't sleep long. We were awoken by the sound of men talking. I signaled for my brother to keep quiet and listened intently. It was hard to make out what was being said, but I could tell there was at least 2 men nearby, walking towards the falls and discussing something frantically. By the sounds of it, they were just passing by our tent, but obviously weren't close enough to have noticed it or our bikes. When I was sure they were past, I quietly opened the zipper to peek outside. The moon gave enough light for me to see that in the distance there were 3 men, 2 large ones in suits holding another thinner one up in between them. I assumed he was drunk or something. My brother asked what was going on, and I turned and told him to hush. Looking back out, I saw they were now by the falls. They dropped the one in the middle to the ground between them, and then I saw the guy on the right pull out a massive knife, the type you use to carve a turkey or slice a roast. It shimmered in the moonlight. It was unmistakable. I wasn't prepared for what I saw next. He crouched down and started stabbing the man on the ground as hard as he could, dozens of times. We could hear the man groaning at first, then just stabbing sounds. It was so disturbing, but I couldn't look away. The man then stood up and tossed the knife over the cliff. And then I clearly heard one of them say, "Come on, let's toss him over," before they picked up the body and threw it down after the knife. My heart sunk. Never before or since have I ever seen anything so gruesome. I wasn't prepared for that. I'll never be able to erase it from my memory. After that, the guy knelt down and put his hands in the river and washed them and his face, and then took off his jacket and threw it down over the cliff too. Then they turned and started walking back. I slowly and silently leaned back to my pillow, signaling my brother to keep absolutely quiet. He could see the urgency in my eyes. We listened as the footsteps and voices got closer and closer. I was amazed that I could make out that they were talking about food, what they were going to eat, as if they hadn't just killed and thrown a guy off a cliff. I was just waiting for one of them to notice our camp and do the same to us, but the footsteps kept going until they disappeared. We stayed silent for the rest of the night, but didn't sleep a wink. When the sun finally showed itself, we packed up quickly and rode home at high speed, even my brother this time. I didn't tell him what I saw until we were far away from the falls, and even then I didn't tell him in detail until he was much older. I told the police as well that day. They seemed to have taken me very seriously, but never followed up with me about it, and I never heard about anything on the news or in the paper either. For all I know, that body is still down there, however it would look now, over 40 years later. One weekend in August of 1999, me and my friend Jeremy went and stayed at a campground about 2 hours out of the city that we lived in. We were in our mid-teens, just driving, and planned on going up there and hopefully meeting some girls that summer. Turned out that the campground that we went to was basically empty. There were about 30 sites, half of which backed off against a fast-moving river. We were disappointed, but it was all good. We still planned on making the most of it. We brought up about 60 beer and a big bag of weed, so things were looking up. Also, with no other campers, we could crank our music until all hours of the night. We got shit-faced that first night, and I ended up passing out halfway into the tent while Jeremy crashed on the long wooden seat of the picnic table in the campsite. And when we woke up, everything we had was intricately stacked on the table and the other seat. All of our empty cans, full cans, firewood, cigarette packs, lighters, food containers, shoes, wallets, paper towel rolls, everything, all standing up straight. We each accused the other of doing it, obviously, but I knew that I didn't. It looked like hard work, too, that would have taken a long time, so I was pretty sure he didn't do it either. But we were alone out there, so who else could it have been? Anyway, that afternoon we started up again, and by night we were both drunk and stoned out of our minds. But we at least made it into the tent and into our sleeping bags before we passed out that night. What we saw when we got up made my heart stand still. All over our campsite was dead birds, honestly, hundreds of them, and all of our stuff was stacked on top of each other, reaching about 5 feet in the air in the corner of the site. We were speechless. We both knew damn straight that neither of us could have done any of it. One touch of the pile of our things made everything come crashing down all at once. Even if I tried 1,000,000 times, I wouldn't have been able to have made everything balance how it was set up. Despite the wicked hangover, we wasted no time packing up all our shit and getting the hell out of there, stepping over piles of dead crows in the process. I have no explanation to this day for any of that, and I never stayed there again. When I was 17, me and 2 of my buddies went up to a local lake here in Michigan for a trip. And when I say trip, I mean we brought up a big bag of mushrooms to eat and have a major psychedelic experience. The plan was to be there for 3 days. The first day we'd set up camp and get used to our surroundings. The second night we would do the shrooms, and on day 3, after we'd fully recovered, we'd drive home. In a nutshell, things did not go as planned. That first night, when everything was calm and quiet, we sat on a log by the lake's edge and sparked up a joint. It was an incredibly clear night and billions of stars were visible, and that's not an exaggeration. Lost in separate thoughts, we went quiet and drifted into the vibe of the sound of the calm water lapping up against the sand, when all of a sudden, a star seemed to be moving. We all took notice of it and watched it as it descended towards us, growing bigger and bigger. Soon we could see that the light it was made up of consisted of multiple shades of white, blue, and purple, which seemed to spin in a circle. We all looked at each other in disbelief, but none of us said a word. We kind of had the vibe you'd have when seeing a rare bird or a small animal. You're excited and want to take it in, while your instinct tells you to be quiet as not to scare it off. At least that's how I remember feeling. Either way, this thing just kept getting closer. Within a couple minutes, it was low enough to be seen clearly reflected off of the lake. At that point, I started feeling nervous. We all did, I'm sure. My friend to the right of me stood up as if he was ready to run. That caught like a fever. Soon enough, we were all standing. This was a bona fide 100% UFO, and it kept descending and getting closer and closer. Eventually, it was right over the lake, about a stone's throw distance from us. It was a standard image of a UFO too, a flying saucer, like 2 dinner plates put together top to top, dark gray in color. The lights were spinning around the bottom, green, white, blue, purple, and a darkish red. It was silent, and when it came to a still state, it was as if it was frozen in the space it was in. We looked at it stunned and stoned for a good 30 seconds before my friend broke the silence and yelled, "Run!" Of course, when he said this, he broke out and ran away from the lake as fast as he could. We did what anyone would do and kicked it after him. We ran for a while before stopping to catch our breath. By then, we stood inside the woods asking each other what the hell that was and why we ran. Then over top of us, we saw it zooming up into the sky, and within a second, it was just another dot among billions of others. We decided against doing the shrooms the next day. That was a crazy enough experience for us. That was definitely from another world. It was a real-life alien experience. I've never seen another since. But me and those same 2 buddies talk about that night whenever we get a chance to get together. I could never do how insane it was justice in a simple story. It was out of this world. Last summer was the last camping trip I'll be taking for a while. Maybe forever. If you knew me, you'd know how strong of a statement that really is. To introduce myself, my name is Tyson. I'm not a notorious bushwhacking outdoorsman of any measure, but I do love to camp and have gone on a few trips every summer for as long as I can remember. Living in the Pacific Northwest, this is a common attribute to one's life. Last year I went on 3 separate excursions. The first 2 were great. The third ruined camping for me altogether. I'll try to explain as best I can. I'm no writer, so bear with me. There were 4 of us there, me, my girlfriend, and another couple, my best friend and his wife. Since we were in elementary school, the 4 of us have gone to Winnipesaukee Lake, about 5 hours from really anywhere in every direction. Half of the fun of going there is the long trip out there. Our parents are all too old now to even want to make the journey anymore, but for the past few years we kept the tradition alive. The thing about Winnipesaukee Lake is that it's not a state park and contains no real campgrounds. You basically have to find a spot to pitch your tent and stay there. The benefit is that it's free to camp there. The drawback is that you have no running water, which means no showering or toilets, and you have to lug up your own water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning your dishes. But that's never been a problem by us. Now, When we were kids, a lot of the families from our town used to go up to the lake together. It was like a little community. But then as time went on, less and less people went up. The year before last, there was just us 4 and then 2 other couples and their kids. Last year, it was just us. Me, Stacy, Ryan, and Megan. We arrived in the early evening on our first day. That left us enough time to just set up camp, make a fire, and roast some weenies and s'mores and then crawl into our tents for bed. The next morning, we got up early and launched Ryan's boat into the lake, and then after breakfast, took it out for a rip on the glass-calm waters of Winnipesaukee, armed with a few joints and a 12-pack of beer. After a few hours, the hunger started to set in, so we headed back to the camp and were mortified to arrive and see our stuff strewn all over the place. Our cooler was upside down, and all the food was ripped open and scattered around the camp. We were ticked, but luckily we hadn't fully unpacked and had our water and food stock still in the back of the truck, safely locked away from whatever animal had ransacked us. The girls were scared it was a bear. We told them not to worry, even if it was. This wasn't the first time we'd been up here, and as usual, my rifle was also in the truck. Ryan already had his in his hands by that point, but it didn't matter. Whatever it was long gone and no longer in sight. Most animals tend to be more scared of humans than vice versa, so as long as we were in the camp, we'd most likely be safe. All this was a reminder to lock everything up in the end. The rest of the night was great. We had a big dinner of steaks, pasta, and corn on the cob, and finished that 12-pack before breaking out the dark rums and cokes. We knew we'd be hung over, and that's all part of the fun. A hangover in the great outdoors always fades fast anyways. A little hair of the dog, and presto, you're back on track. That being said, we all slept in until about 10:30 a.m., and finally made our way slowly out of the tents to make our way to the chairs set up around the fire pit, feeling worse than dead. Luckily, coffee with a little rum in it began to work its magic on us when suddenly Ryan yelled, "Where the hell is my boat?" Our sore heads all turned to face the lake. He was right. His boat was gone. "Did you forget to anchor it?" I asked. "Hell no," Ryan answered. "We double-tied it when we got the rest of the beer." He was right. That boat was locked into position. We even made the knots extra tight and intricate so we wouldn't try to go for a rip when we got good and drunk, knowing we wouldn't be able to untie it in that state. Ryan ran down to the shore and grabbed the rope, which was now laying on the beach. He didn't say a word as we all caught up behind him. He just stared at it in confusion. "What is it?" I asked. He looked at me and answered, "It's cut." He was right. The rope was clean cut, as if someone took a machete to it. Even a big knife couldn't have cut it that cleanly. "Holy shit," I said after he passed it to me. We all suddenly took a look around in all directions, sharing the feeling that we weren't alone out here. Megan broke the silence by suggesting that we go home. "Go?" Ryan exclaimed. "We're not going anywhere until I get my boat." Stacy started marching back to camp. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To call the cops," she answered. I'll reiterate here that Winnipesaukee is an illegal campground, and calling the cops would guarantee us possibly thousands of dollars worth of fines. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," Ryan said, stopping Stacy in her tracks. He explained why we couldn't call the police and then put out his idea. "Look," he began, "this is a lake, so unless whoever took the boat has a trailer waiting, it's still here somewhere. Me and Tyson will hop in my truck and take it around the bend and climb the peak. That way we'll have a view of the whole lake. Chances are some teens took it for a joyride and just beached it after." "And just leave us here with the bears and machete-brandishing teens?" Megan interjected. "I don't think so. We're coming with you." "Fine," Ryan agreed. "Then let's go." We all piled into Ryan's truck, but barely moved before we realized something else was wrong, as Ryan started complaining that his steering wasn't working right. I hopped out and noticed right away. "Your tires are flat." Ryan jumped out pissed off. All 4 tires were completely empty. Turning around, we saw that so were mine. They were all slashed. You would have learned some new curse words if you were there that day. We were both livid. The girls, of course, were now freaking out. I'll admit fear was beginning to creep up on me, too. Someone was deliberately harassing us, and I didn't like it. I had a gut feeling we were in serious danger. On the other hand, Ryan was strictly fuming. He grabbed his rifle, cocked it, and fired a shot in the air, triggering the birds in the surrounding trees to take sudden flight out of the area. "You better hide, motherfuckers!" he screamed at the top of his lungs. "I'm coming for you!" I don't know if anyone was around to hear him, but one thing was for sure. That gunshot sure scared the hell out of Stacy and Megan. They were visibly shaken. That was probably the first time either of them ever heard a real gun. "Come on," Ryan barked at us. We followed his lead and began marching into the opening of the woods that led to the lookout peak. Ryan was on a mission, stomping on twigs and pushing aside branches like a soldier in Vietnam. Nothing was slowing him down. The mood had changed. It was almost as if we were his prisoners all of a sudden. Of course, we knew that wasn't the case, but Ryan seemed so unbalanced it just made an already uncertain situation seem all the more dangerous. No one spoke as we trudged through the woods towards the peak, our 3 sets of eyes darting every which way the whole time in hopes to catch a bear or an armed maniac ready to pounce on us before it was too late. Ryan kept his eyes straight ahead as he broke a path for the rest of us to follow. Finally, we reached the base of the peak, sweaty and out of breath. It was a pretty sheer rock face. I'd climbed it before, but it wasn't easy. It was years ago and we made a whole day of it. Now I was hung over as shit and had no food in me, and something told me Ryan wouldn't be willing to take it slow. I was right. He started climbing that thing like a ring-tailed lemur, the gun slung by a strap over his shoulder waving back and forth. "You coming?" he said, looking down at me. "Yeah," I answered, grabbing hold of the rock. The girls had both grown up climbing that thing and passed by me pretty soon after starting behind me. Soon enough, they were all at the top, and I was sweating my ass off, looking for places to grab onto to make my way up higher. "Right there!" I heard Ryan yell. The 3 of them spoke excitedly after, but I couldn't make out what was being said. Finally, now almost completely out of breath in my lungs, I reached the top and laid on my back to recoup for a second. But I should have known better. No sooner than I began to relax, Ryan was ordering us all back down the rock face. "What?" I protested. "No way, give me a minute to catch my breath." Ryan groaned, but knew he had no choice. "Well, at least stand up and look at this," he said. I slowly got up to my feet and looked at the view. It was breathtaking. From up here, you could see the whole lake. It was the reason people climbed the peak, a truly unbeatable view. And there on the northeast corner was Ryan's boat, its bow nestled up on the beach. Where it was, by the way, was at the opposite end of the lake from where we were staying, and about an hour's hike from the peak we were standing on top of. And so we began by scaling that goddamn peak back down to the ground. I will say as a side note that climbing down is always more terrifying than climbing up, simply based on the fact that you're looking down the entire time. But anyway, we survived and began the next leg of our journey. There was a beaten path, if you can call it that, most of the way at least. Ryan was still driven to the point that any time any of us asked for a breath, he groaned and moaned until we were back on the move. It took just over 60 minutes, but eventually the boat was in our sights. What surprised us was that at sea level we could see what the canopy of woods had hidden from the peak. Behind the boat was a few shacks, shanties I guess you'd call them. None of us had ever seen anything like that before in all the years we'd been coming up to Winnipesaukee. We'd taken the boat through that whole lake so many times, but had never seen a sign of a human inhabitant. These were new. Upon seeing them from the distance we were at, we stopped up. "What are we going to do?" Stacy threw out there. Ryan saw no point in discussing it. "What are we going to do?" he repeated. "We're going to go over there and kick the shit out of whoever took my boat and flattened our tires." "Time for you to calm the fuck down," Megan said, finally hitting her breaking point. "We don't know who these people are, and they sure as hell aren't teenagers if they're living out here." "I don't care who they are," Ryan snapped back. "One look at this rifle and I'll bet they fall in line." Megan shook her head. "And you don't think they might have guns too, Ryan?" "Shh," Stacy interjected. "Look." We looked across the water to see activity at the shanties. The one on the right's door opened and a big man, walked out. We were at a pretty good distance, enough that behind the bushes and trees we were in we'd be provided pretty good cover, but we still got low to blend in even more, and at this distance could still make out what the guy looked like. Like I said, he was big, probably about 6'3" or 6'4", noticeably overweight, and he had a completely bald head. His outfit consisted purely of denim overalls. Glancing to my right, I noticed Ryan was pointing the gun at him with his eye in the scope. "What, are you gonna kill him?" I whispered, somewhat sarcastically. "I should," he whispered back, but no. He passed the gun to me so I could take a look. The magnification of the scope showed me every ugly detail of this guy. He had a pig nose and an all-around hideous face. "God, he's ugly," I said to the others as I watched him sit on a chair and whittle a stick. "Let me see," Stacy said. I passed her over the rifle. "Let's go over there and confront him already," Ryan hissed impatiently. "He's alone." "No, he's not," Stacy announced. Just then another man came out from another shack, equally as fat and inbred looking and also wearing overalls with nothing underneath. He was followed by a whale of a woman in a muumuu who probably weighed as much as the two of them combined. Her hair was gray and scraggly, and I'd guess that she was much older than the other two. "Ah," Ryan growled. "I don't give a shit. These people are hicks. Let's go over there and get my fucking boat back." Before any of us could respond, Stacy suddenly shrieked as a hand came from above her head and gripped the barrel of the rifle. By the time we were up and on our feet, it was turned on us in the hands of another redneck-looking guy in a tie-dyed shirt and cargo shorts. He held it like he knew how to use it, and we all froze on the spot. "Make a move and this girl's gonna die right here in these woods," he said matter-of-factly before whistling a loud screech. "Hands up," he then yelled at us. We had no choice but to obey. Within 30 seconds, the hicks from the shacks were behind the one pointing the gun at us. "What the hell we got here?" the bald one said with a little giddiness in his tone. "We got us some company," a voice said from behind them. The old woman then appeared. It had taken her a bit longer to get to us due to a limp and the size of her. Up close, these people looked even worse. They looked like the type of folk you'd see in a Rob Zombie film. Ryan was the first to find some words. "That's my boat over there. I want it back." "That's not your boat no more," the bald one said. "That's right," the other one in the overalls laughed. "Not your boat anymore." "Look," I tried to plead reasonably, "we don't want any trouble." "Bullshit," said the one holding our rifle. "This little bitch was pointing this thing right at you, Mama." The older lady crooked her neck at us. "Is that right?" she said. "Well, that's not very nice." "Yeah," the second guy chuckled again. "That's not very nice, haha." "We were just using the scope to see who took the boat," I told them. "We wouldn't hurt anyone." The one holding the gun pointed at me. "Yeah?" he said. "Then why you have this thing then?" "Because these woods are filled with bears," Ryan answered with some attitude. "So you must be the tough one of the group, huh?" the old lady said. "You the one that fired this thing a little while ago? We thought we heard a rifle blast. This your piece?" With his hand still up, Ryan nodded yes. "Not so tough without it, are you?" she taunted. I could see the rage building up in Ryan, and I was praying he didn't make a move. The old woman noticed too. "You want to hit me, tough guy?" she asked. "You come here to get even on us for taking your shitty boat? Huh? Well, come on then. Do your worst." Ryan looked about ready to explode, but didn't move a muscle. The rage in his eyes only fueled her to keep going. "That's what I thought. Just a chicken shit without his rifle." "Yeah," her son laughed again. "Chicken shit without his rifle." And that was the breaking point. As the old woman turned away for a second to give a smile to her imbecile man-child for his terrible joke, I saw Ryan cock his hand back and knew I couldn't stay still, or I'd probably be eating lead. As he drilled the man-child in the face, I grabbed the barrel of the gun and yanked it with all of my strength. The redneck wouldn't let go easy and came falling towards me, luckily losing his balance and slipping onto the ground and rolling out of the fern and onto the lake's shore. I managed to hold on to the gun and disarm him. Meanwhile, the bald hick swung his knife at Ryan and connected, cutting deep down the side of his ribcage, tearing his shirt and skin all at once. I turned the rifle around and fired a shot out of pure instinct, just missing the man-child, who tore off through the trees in the opposite direction of their shanties, disappearing into the woods. Stacy and Megan were both screaming, and I got in front of them to block the guy with the knife, who I now noticed was a good distance away from us, probably in reaction to the rifle blast. The old woman stood frozen in place with her hands up. Whipping around, I saw the guy who had fallen into the bushes attempting to take a lunge at me, but stopping dead and putting his hands up as soon as he saw the barrel aimed at him. I suddenly realized I was in control now, and so I backed up and moved the barrel back and forth to the three of them, finally giving my first order. "All of you into the fucking water, now!" None of them moved. So I marched right up to that old bitch and shoved the gun right against her temple and yelled, "Now!" This got them all moving. They all waded into the water, the one with the knife halfway to their shacks, the other two right in front of us, the fourth still nowhere to be seen. I yelled for them to get close together and keep their hands up, which they did. They may have been half-wits, but with this thing pointed at them, they suddenly got a little bit smarter and kept their traps shut and followed my orders. I was trained to shoot, and I'm sure my form dictated that clearly to them. Over to my left side, Ryan was bleeding out on the ground. Megan was tending to him, but oh man, there was a lot of blood. Time was of the essence. "Okay," I said, sweat pouring down my forehead. "They're going to make their way over to the boat and you're going to stay put, you understand?" The inbreds nodded as they stood waist deep in the lake. Megan and Stacy helped Ryan to his feet and did their best to brace him as they walked along the curvature of the shore to the boat. He was in rough shape, moaning in agony the whole time, but in about a minute, they were inside the boat yelling to me that there were no keys. "Where are they?" I demanded. "I don't know," the old woman said expressionless. I blasted a shot right beside her, and I bet the three of them pissed themselves based on their reactions. "Where are they?" I screamed again, the stress of the situation nearly choking me at this point. The chair, the skinhead rambled out. "On the shore there." After hearing this, Megan jumped out of the boat and walked over to their yard, if you want to call it that, and over to a beach chair in front of their shacks. She held up the keys and then ran back and started up the boat. In no time, they were heading over to me. Gun still pointed at the old bitch in the water, whose hands trembled above her head from exhaustion by then. I stepped into the lake. But before I could reach out for the boat, Stacy suddenly screamed, "Look out!" just before the side of my face was struck harder than it had ever been hit before. For a second, I saw nothing but stars, but the panicking shouts of everyone around me forced me back to reality. The half-wit who had run off back into the woods was back. He had hit me with a stone and my head was bleeding heavily. He didn't keep beating me, though. I had dropped the gun into the water and he was searching for it. My first instinct was to beat him to it, but Megan's voice cut through the mayhem saying, "Get in the fucking boat, Tyson!" Looking past the boat, I saw the other inbreds were running through the water towards us, knife in the hand of the bald one still. I reached out and got up on the back ladder and told them to step on it, just as the bald bastard grabbed onto the bar of the bow. Stacy gunned it and ran right over him. I was holding on for dear life as we flew away into the deep waters of the lake, with a perfect view of the half-wit finding the rifle and aiming it at us. "Get down!" I yelled, covering my face with my arm as if that would have blocked a bullet. Shots started going off, but luckily none connected with anything but the air. Soon enough, we were in the heart of the lake. Megan had the wherewithal to call the cops on her cell, which thankfully worked out there. 2 helicopters arrived within 10 minutes or so. Ryan held up quite well, but I took a turn for the worse when we were a good distance away from those filthy forest dwellers. I suppose I was running on adrenaline after that initial blow to my head, but the severity caught up to me while we were still on the boat. I got dizzy and began shaking, and then I started throwing up. I blacked out in the chopper that airlifted Ryan and I to the closest hospital and had an extended stay in the ICU. Ryan received over 40 stitches for his cut, but went home that day. I was eventually transferred to a hospital closer to home when my condition improved. For a while, it was thought that I would succumb to a brain hemorrhage. Luckily, I ended up making a full recovery. The worst part is, the family who attacked us got away cleanly. There was nothing left in those shacks to identify them by. We gave their descriptions, but nothing ever came of it. It sure left a bad taste in my mouth, though. I used to love camping. Now I associate it with the worst trauma of my life, and I'll probably never go again. Well, we've reached the end of another broadcast, my friends. Thanks for joining us in the world of Nocturnity. Don't forget to like this video and share it to wherever videos can be shared too. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel. Once again, and as always, this broadcast has been brought to you by cardanapparel.com, CARDAN apparel.com. Don't forget to come back soon and often. Until next time, my friends.